They may see killing a serial offender as a net good for the world, and their actions as an example of kind of taking one for the team. At the same time, they gain status and a sense of moral superiority.
If you already got life in that bitch, you might as well just do it. I'm sorry, bro. You're not getting out. You know what I'm like, you have to do 100 years plus 22 years. You're gonna be dead. If you're already gonna spend your life in jail, you might as well make that shit better and have some, at least have a fucking, you know what I mean? Have some, at least some rep. What's going on, everybody? Whenever we hear stories of child predators getting arrested in prison, the first thing we think is that they are going to go through hell. Their fellow inmates are going to be giving them the roughest time in prison, possibly reciprocating the same energy that they did to their victims, snatching their trays, or even worse, possibly killing them. So we're gonna check out this video titled, "What Happens to Child Predators in Prison?" Let's go.
It's the 2nd of February, 1980. We're in the New Mexico State Penitentiary.
Oh my
and
God.
It's chaos. Hours before, due to unheeded warnings and poor safety standards, a group of violent inmates first escaped their cells, and then their unit. Soon, they would have control of the entire prison and several hostages. They had access to weapons from the prison armory, drugs from the pharmacy, and tools from the workshop. We're talking full law and order breakdown.
Yo.
The prison was quickly surrounded by law enforcement, and eventually the riot would be brought
like
under
Prison Break.
control. But not before some of the most gruesome and violent acts perhaps ever performed on Earth were first carried out. Inside the prison was Cell Block 4.
Cell Block
the
1.
protected wing. It made
That's what you ain't never. Yo, what did he say about something Cell Block 1?
mainly housed those that needed separation from general population. Informants, the mentally ill, and most importantly for this video, offenders. The
Wait, they
inmates
killed all
inside
those
the block
people?
were still locked in their cells, and they watched in horror as rioting inmates used acetylene torches over several hours to simply cut their way inside. Some inmates tried to break out of their cells, some tried to alert law enforcement outside, some tried to block the doors or even tie them closed to stop the intruders. But
There's
it was
nothing
too
you can
late.
do, yeah.
One by one, individuals
Imagine how scary that is when you're just like watching them break this shit down. Boy, we gonna get you, boy. We gonna get you. You wanna touch kids? Come touch me. Come touch me. Bing, 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 bing. And you just have to sit there and you just cowering in fear, just knowing that they're gonna fucking kill you. Oh my God. I wonder how they took that shit over, bro.
dragged out of their cells, were brutally tortured, and then killed.
Ooh.
One inmate was said to have had a blowtorch placed inside his eyes and mouth, causing his head to explode. The New Mexico State Penitentiary is permanently closed today, but there still remains a burned-in stain on the concrete from this moment, all those years later. The inmates had been looking for the snitches and sex offenders, a subset of prisoner considered to be at the very bottom of the totem.
I'm not gonna lie, bro. Those are like the top 2 on the hit list. Like, snitching, it's crazy to think that snitching is just as bad as being a sex offender in prison, bro. That's literally insane. You would think like in a place where people don't have regard for law and order, there's still a code of conduct that has to be maintained, bro. That's literally great. Like, that's like the worst nightmare for anybody that's in those circumstances, bro.
Totem pole of prison society. This might be the worst case scenario for a sex offender in prison, but plenty of brutal violence is carried out against them inside prisons all over the world. And it brings a few questions to the forefront of our minds. What is life really like for sex offenders and child abusers in prison?
Hell.
Why is violence so
I don't even feel bad for them. I'm gonna be honest with you. Here's my thought process. Kids, you remember how, if you're an adult, right? You know how it was when we were kids. Kids have this level of innocence about the world, right? They don't, especially the younger you are, you don't comprehend the concept of getting sick and dying, growing old. You think you're just gonna be a kid forever. You don't understand bills. You don't like your life. You're just existing freely because you're a kid. When you become an adult, you have to manage and maintain your own existence, right? So that comes with a burden. You have to pay your bills, rent, electricity, insurance, groceries, gas, car insurance, all that stuff, right? You have to, there's a certain, there's a certain management fee. When you're a kid, your parents handle all that. So all you're doing is just literally existing. And you have this like creativity and like whimsical nature. And you're just able to like, your imagination is just beautiful, right? So if you are an adult and you know that these kids are vulnerable and they're easily influenced and you can take advantage of them, and you do that, you're the fucking scum of the earth, bro. Because you can just ruin somebody's entire life.
Against them. And what do those offenders and the prisons do to mitigate it? It's time to find out how the scum of the earth stay alive. And sometimes how they don't.
Man.
So, when a offender is first sent to prison, what can they expect? Truthfully, it all depends on which prison they might be sent to, as well as what security classification it has, even the country itself. For the purposes of this video, we're just going to use the UK, USA, and traditional Western examples. Although for what it's worth, a person in this situation will likely struggle everywhere.
For sure. Nah, you know the prisons outside of the West, they're probably crazier. Like the Philippines, they got you jammed in there with 50 other people in one little unit. Oh my God, that shit's probably hell.
Not. Offenders today are typically sentenced to serve their time in lower security prisons, although particularly violent cases will often move them swiftly up the ladder. Some prisons today are even specifically designed to deal with offenders from the get-go, but we'll get to that later.
Yo, that's actually crazy. Do you think that they have prisons that only house sex offenders? That's kind of crazy if they had some shit like that. Like a prison for only snitches, a prison for only sex offenders, a prison for the craziest murderers in the world, and then like maybe like a prison for like scammers. That would be crazy.
Lower security prisons often house a larger number of offenders, so they're somewhat safer for the average deviant than at higher security levels. Low security is for the lower risk inmates, people who are inside for more petty crimes or coming off the back of a long sentence at a more secure facility. Simply put, it's not as common for an ex-offender to get attacked in that environment because most inmates are just trying to do their time and regain their freedom. Brutalizing an ex-offender just isn't worth that. That doesn't mean it never happens, and not all lower security prisons are the same, but the risk is certainly lower in general. It's at the higher security facilities where the trouble for sex offenders really ramps up. For starters, it's pretty much impossible for an ex-offender to hide their crimes inside prison itself. Whether it's the old, "what are you in for?" question, handing someone their papers, having their story checked by outsiders, or a loose-lipped guard, inmates will eventually find out that their fellow inmate is, to put it mildly, no good. From here, we need to learn a little bit about the prison hierarchy, just so that we understand what no good really implies. In a lot of prisons, the social hierarchy is based on what kind of criminal you are. At the top tends to be those who are career criminals who've committed violent offences. Mobsters, armed robbers, that sort of level. As you head further down the hierarchy, you find white-collar criminals, as well as those who are guilty of lesser or non-violent crimes. Thefts, drug offences, that kind of thing. Every criminal has a place on the ladder, and if you zoom down right to the bottom of it, you get into the untouchable tier, where inmates finding out about an individual's conviction is going to make their life in prison much, much worse.
I love it, and I love it, and I love it, and I love it. I want you to go through hell. I want you to go through hell if you're a freaking sex offender, bro. So what happens? So let's say you're an armed robber, right? I have a question. Do you get treated better if you're in prison? Like you get more respect? Is that what he's trying to say?
Right down here, their place often focuses around the vulnerability of their victims. Ex-offenders are of course present. Almost everyone in prison has a someone they care about who may have found themselves targeted at some point, and so predators are likely to draw ire. Child and child ex-offenders are pretty much the lowest of the low for this reason. Beyond being an obvious societal taboo, children are seen as innocent and uncorrupted.
Yes.
Most people will agree that any person who takes that away is a scumbag. And despite the fact that criminals in prison would have put innocent people through similarly traumatic events, You won't be surprised to know that they feel largely the same about crimes towards children. Following that line of inquiry, others who exist in this kind of tier include those found guilty of elder or those found guilty tier in children. Following that line of inquiry, others who exist in this kind of tier include those found guilty of elder or those found guilty of harming other vulnerable people like the disabled.
Wow.
The only other criminals who can find themselves this low within prison social hierarchy are snitches. As the saying goes, they of course get stitches.
Yup.
Offenders and
snitches get stitches. You know what's crazy? Hey, nobody likes snitches, bro. If you think about it, if you snitch and you're in the army, that shit's called treason. Nobody respects snitches at all, bro, because you don't stand for nothing. You're willing to, look out for yourself at the expense of other people. I would say, bro, yeah, I think it's kind of crazy how you could be a murderer, you could be a thief, you could do all this shit, but unanimously, there still is this there's like this moral compass that exists, and it's crazy to see it be enforced in an area where you would think it would be the Wild West and people would have no regard for the law or for other people, It's like, even amongst murderers and thieves, like, okay, we don't fuck with kids, we don't fuck with the elderly, we don't fuck with the disabled, but we'll fuck with a regular civilian, though. I mean, I respect that still. I think that's crazy to think. But a lot of people, bro, who are in jail, like, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but I do think some people are just products of their environment. Like, imagine being in, like, a gang, and you're just like, you killed somebody who's maybe in a rival gang or somebody that got roped up into some shit. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that shit is like, you're just a product. You just, you know what I mean? Because that shit gets glorified.
Tend to make up the majority of these untouchable inmates. Of course, though, they're not untouchable, are they? Far from it. Now, you might be led to assume that being a child offender in prison is an instant death sentence, and in some places you might be right, but not everywhere. The key thing about finding out a person has one of these no-good crimes on their record is that they instantly fall to the bottom of that social hierarchy, which makes them an easy target. Nobody, and I mean nobody,
will protect
is going
them.
To stick their neck out to help a convicted offender, least of all because doing so might be seen by others as tolerance towards them. In any case, we'll start with the violence because it's the most visible and visceral example of what can happen to these kind of inmates once they're locked up. Yes, it's true that offenders can be, and sometimes are, targeted in brutal attacks. Some can be attacked pretty much on site, if particular details of their case ever found their way into certain inmates' hands. These guys are often driven off the yard and into protective custody. Some prison yards simply don't tolerate having those kinds of prisoners out and about, and the inmates enforce that policy through violence. Sometimes, gangs who check the paperwork of inmates when they enter a prison will then put pressure on their new cellmates to do something about them, or otherwise risk looking like they condone the crimes. And when it comes to prison, a lot of assaults are more than your average beatdown. A hard object, like a padlock or a rock housed in a sock, can make a devastating blunt force.
Damn, the lock in the sock? Yo, I'm not gonna lie though, I don't feel bad, bro. I genuinely don't feel bad. You deserve that shit. I think we should, when he said, oh, you would think they would get killed, right? I think the world would be a better place if we treated those crimes extremely harsh. If you're like a child sex offender or like a child rapist, yeah, you imagine you're on death row. I think a lot of those people would rethink a lot of their actions, surprisingly. But is our government really gonna do that? When chances are a lot of them would actually fucking die. But it is what it is.
Weapon. Meanwhile, shivs, clubs, and shanks can be made out of almost anything. Heavy objects can be dropped onto inmates from a height. They can be beaten down in camera blind spots or have disgusting liquids thrown over them. Particularly popular in some facilities is the use of, quote, prison napalm. This delightful concoction starts with water, which is boiled either with sugar or a candy bar in it, and then thrown over the target. The sticky contents means it clings to the skin whilst causing severe burns all over the body.
Whoa,
and of course,
hold on, let me hear that again.
or a palm. This delightful concoction starts with water, which is boiled either with sugar or a candy bar in it, and then thrown over the target. The sticky contents means it clings to the skin whilst causing severe burns all over the body.
Oh my
God. And of course, if all else fails, anything within a cell can be turned into a weapon by bashing a person's head into it.
Ooh.
Why an inmate would be attacked might seem obvious, but clearly a universal disdain towards this kind of person doesn't equate to instant violence in every prison. So what causes someone to go after a offender in this way? Of course, as we mentioned, it could be to get them off the yard. If the guards see that a person is being targeted, they will remove someone from the unit so as not to cause more violence in general. So, attacking someone
Damn,
could be a way
that's
to get
crazy. They're maintaining order in there. That's crazy.
The prison gang. It could also be a form of kind of rough justice for the crimes.
Hello.
In general, prison sentences for offenders aren't often seen as sufficient due to short sentencing guidelines. So by attacking the offender in prison, you're kind of making up for where the justice system was perceived to have failed. It could also be someone bragging about what they've done, or it could simply be someone trying to gain notoriety. Margaret Buck, a spokeswoman for the California Department of Corrections, stated as such after the killing of notorious pedophile and former Catholic priest John Gergen, quoting here, "If you take out a offender like this former priest in Massachusetts, maybe the person who took him out thought he'd make a name for himself." Gergen's killer, a man named Joseph Druce, stated that he looked upon Gergen as a prize and plotted his murder for a month beforehand.
What?
In many ways, attacking a notorious offender like this is seen by inmates as a victimless crime. After all, who cares?
I mean, I think you would get respect. Yeah, you would probably get respect for that because it's like, damn, you just took out this guy. He was a priest. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't feel bad, bro. As a priest, people would probably think you would have respect. People would look to you for their problems, bro. This is why I'm not a religious person, because why is it that the people who are the most religious, quote unquote, are the most vile people? They're the most manipulative. They take advantage. They exploit. You have these pastors who get all this money, and people look up to them and they pedestalize them. And you would think this person has the best intention. They're moving with the most virtue. They're moving with the most sharp moral compass because they spend all this time studying scripture. They probably grew up in church. They should be having Jesus should be right here, whispering in their ear, guiding them. But they're corrupted. They're the most corrupted, and they rape little boys and they do all this shit. That's evil, bro. I'm not gonna lie. I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad at all.
Offender gets killed, especially for those who are never.
And I wonder how the judges feel in this situation, because it's like you have to do your job and conduct the law, but at the same time, it's like that shit would play a factor in my mind. Like you are the scum of the earth.
Out and have nothing left to lose. They may see killing a serial offender as a net good for the world, and their actions as an example of kind of taking one for the team. At the same time, they gain status and a sense of moral superiority, and the taxpayer doesn't have to pay for their incarceration anymore. You could make the argument that everybody wins, and lots of people do make that point.
I'm gonna say this. I feel like the people who do that, it's like, if you already got life in that bitch, you might as well just do it. I'm sorry, bro. You're not getting out. If you got like 50, 60 years, you know what I'm like, you have to do 100 years plus 22 years. You're going to be dead. If you're already going to spend your life in jail, you might as well make that shit better and have some, at least have a fucking, you know what I mean? Have at least some rep.
Still the offender, who of course has lost big time, as well as his or her family, who likely
Cut
still
them
care
off.
about them.
Yeah.
But many will feel that this doesn't really matter. All of that, of course, is on top of all the other random violence that could be caused by something else entirely. Taking someone's stuff, accumulating debts, disrespecting
That's what
a
I
gang
think
member,
of.
or someone suffering with mental health problems, snapping in a violent matter. The guards don't help in a lot of prisons in this respect. They're people too, and might have a similar sentiment to wanting to see such offenders brutalised for what they've done.
Yeah.
Some guards might leave doors open or look the other way whilst a brazen attack is carried out.
That's what I would do if I'm a guard. Shit. He huh? What's his name? He's a pedophile. I'll handle it later. I'll handle it later. I got some other shit I gotta deal with.
Allowing for them to plead ignorance and plausible deniability, and writing off such actions as simple accidental mistakes.
Yup.
Some might be, many are not. Regardless, even with the guards sometimes rooting against them, there isn't much sympathy for those on this rung of the ladder whenever bad things happen to them. For example, Richard Huckle was considered one of Britain's most prolific child sex offenders. He was just 3 years into a life sentence when he was stabbed and killed by another inmate.
One of Britain's worst has been stabbed to death in prison.
See, that's when I womp, 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 womp. From this point forward, I don't give a fuck.
Who was from Kent has been jailed for abusing up to 200 children overseas.
Get his ass out of here. Get his ass out of here. I don't feel bad. He deserved that shit. I'm not gonna lie though, killing him is it's a double-edged sword, because it's like now you're dead and you don't have the time to sit there and really. I would have left him alive. I'm not gonna lie, they should have been torturing him for his whole life. You feel me? They should have made him hate his life, hate what he did. I feel like they gave him the easy route. They took him out too early.
He was found dead in his cell at HMP Full Sutton in Yorkshire yesterday. Our Home Affairs correspondent Sarah Corker reports.
How do people end up like that?
Abusing children and babies in both Malaysia and Cambodia.
Babies?
Pleading guilty to no less than 71 offences. More examples would be the likes of John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Jard Fogel, all who were attacked. Dahmer was even killed when he was attacked in 1994. All of their crimes included those committed against young people, and Dahmer's in particular were wrapped in his twisted motivations.
Whoa, wait. Dahmer was a pedophile? What? So bitches were over here having a crush on a fucking pedophile. Huh? That's weird. I'm not gonna lie, bro. Everybody was making such a big deal about this guy. What the fuck?
Gacy wasn't much better, whilst Fogel had status as a celebrity prior to his crimes being revealed. But the thing is, a violent beating, or being threatened, is pretty par for the course in a lot of prisons. Eventually, someone will either be beaten off the yard, or they'll check themselves in for protection. But there are much worse fates for the average offender than just getting beaten up. Of course, getting killed is possible, but it's often rarer than other darker outcomes. One more common result is coercion or extortion. Offender in prison may buy his protection through providing the right people with items from the prison commissary. Some inmates might even be able to arrange money to be wired to an individual's account or to their families. If the offender is famous or otherwise known to be wealthy, this can continue in perpetuity, where offender becomes little more than a piggy bank, doling out money under the threat of violence if they didn't.
Wow.
Coercion, however, doesn't have to be
treat them the way that they treated them damn kids. I don't feel bad.
Financial in nature. Offender could be used to complete various labour tasks and jobs for protection.
Turn him to a
basically
bitch.
Like a slave who is paid by not getting hit in the face. They might be pushed into other crimes within the prison, like helping with smuggling operations or hiding contraband in their cells. They could also be used to pass notes, drugs, or weapons between areas of the prison, or even act as lookouts, really anything that the exploiting party wants. The only consistent factor being the protection of the individual from wider harm, just at a cost. And that cost can be even greater still, as some offenders are extorted and forced into performing acts on other prisoners for a form of protection. Of course, some inmates deliberately and violently target offender inmates in this way as well, as if to dull out a sense of vigilante justice, to put them through what they themselves have done.
Hold on, so they fucking they Uno reverse the shit. That's crazy. I don't even think Felice Johnson would do some shit like that. That's crazy. I'm at a loss.
Others. There is always the option of becoming a prison wife for protection. It is a truly...
Hold my pocket, bitch. Grab my fucking pocket. You're gonna be nothing but a fucking human fucking pocket bussy. That's crazy.
Miserable existence founded in pain, fear, violence, and control.
Oh my god.
But for some, even this hell is preferable to the alternative, which is widespread ostracization and isolation from the rest of the prison population. If someone is beaten off the yard, they are put in protective custody, which is a double-edged
Solitary.
sword. An individual will be somewhat safer there, but it comes at the cost of a staggering amount of human interaction. Humans are social beings. We're designed to want to converse and mix with others. And even in prison, that feeling is still there. But many units don't permit offenders such a luxury. Many inmates want nothing to do with those who are considered even greater scumbags than them, and the result is a social pariah status. They experience something akin to total identity collapse after being rejected by everything and everyone.
Good.
They simply become their crime and nothing more, in a way that not many other prisoners experience. It's, as you can imagine, isolating and lonely.
I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. Let them sit in that cell and let them fucking rot. Let them deteriorate and sit there and think about everything that they did. Let them beg and plead and pray and regret all day, every day. Let them sit in that cell, and everywhere they look is a stone cold blank slate wall where they have to realize where they're at and what they've done to put themselves in this situation. I don't feel bad. They deserve it, and you will never even try to get me. I will never even feel I won't even feel a fourth of a percent of sympathy for anybody that places themselves in this situation. I don't give a fuck. I'm sorry.
Might see being left alone as the ultimate win within prison, but it doesn't quite work that way. Even in protective custody, people are subject to the risks of everyday prison life, and offenders face the added cost of spending potentially years of it without significant social interaction. It leads to a quiet, monotonous existence free from the vanishingly few perks that exist inside, only punctured by moments of extreme fear and violence. Isolation in prison is associated with a variety of mental health issues and unhealthy behaviours. Again, there's no real sympathy or love for those in that position, but it just goes to show how much harder it can be for those who commit the darkest crimes. So then, what can an inmate do to mitigate their status inside prison? What few strategies do offenders use to make life more bearable on the inside? Well, it's a mix. As we mentioned, they can always check in to protective custody, as known as solitary confinement, or the special housing unit. Some make this choice and others have it made for them. The isolation, of course, offers some protection, but as we said, it comes at the cost
Losing your fucking mind in
of the
there.
individual's mental health. Some have no issues being isolated like this because they understand the alternative or just seem to manage better in their own company. But there are, of course, risks, both physical and...
Damn, that shit is... I don't feel bad. I really don't feel bad. But I'm taking that element away and I'm just looking at it as like, damn, this is a person who's like held up in a cell like an animal. You know, like zoochosis, when they start swaying around and walking in circles and shit. The human brain is more intricate than we can ever understand. You know what I mean? Human beings are very complex. Imagine what this does to a person just being in solitary confinement for years. You probably go batshit crazy. They're probably they probably have to sit there and take mad medication, probably antidepressants and all type of shit. They're probably zombies. They're probably sitting there just on a mix of different things. And then it's like the side. I'm thinking now, if you want multiple different antidepressants and mental health pills, there's probably side effects. So you got pills for the pills. So you probably got to take like a whole thing of medication every day. Oh my God.
Psychological, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Another option is gang protection. Again, many prison gangs, especially in the US, are based around race, and even amongst the lowest of the low, there is some level of protection, at least from other gangs.
Oh my God.
Offenders in that environment will only be targeted if their gang's shot caller gives the okay. It's certainly possible for a person to be attacked despite this, but in general it does slim down the chances of a random act of brutal violence.
Okay.
Another option is for those individuals to band together, as strength in numbers can put off single attackers. It also helps with the isolation, as offenders then find a group with each other. Depending on the prison, some yards have a large number of offenders, and so the prison culture begrudgingly accepts them, resulting in the violence towards them becoming less widespread. A more drastic solution from the prison management side is to create whole wings mostly dedicated to offenders. When these offenders aren't just a minority, but a plurality or even a majority of inmates, violence towards them obviously decreases. With the amount that these guys check themselves in or have to isolate themselves...
Yeah, I think that's like the most rational thing. Like, just house them together. Just put them in their own little spot, keep them together, and just let them be. Let them be, bro. That's the way I see it. If you're gonna, if it's like really on the type of timing where you just don't want them to like suffer as much, I don't really give a fuck. I want them to suffer, but I feel like that's the most logical answer.
It makes sense then to just give them their own wing. There's a real tension here though between them, and the non-offender prisoners who then have to exist in their wing might be afraid of being lumped in with the real ex-offenders. Having such units within prisons makes them a target, like in the New Mexico riot that we mentioned in the intro, and there's no limit to the creativity of cruelty that some may try to inflict on them. Often, guards or upper prison management has to threaten strict crackdowns and increased times on sentences to get many to fall in line. Of course, though this has little effect on those who believe they've got nothing left to lose, like lifers. What else? Well, if this kind of offender is really lucky, they might even be sent to an entire prison dedicated to offenders. These are called SOMPs, or offender management programs. Now, these programs...
See, that's what I said. It would make sense to just house them all in one big prison. Just put the sex offenders with the sex offenders, put the murderers with the murderers, put the scammers with the scammers, the druggies with the druggies. And then just like give, I don't know, from like if I was like a politician, that's how I would do it. And then just like, because technically the point of a prison is supposed to be to rehabilitate people, but we know that's not the case, right? Certain people, I would just like, you would just have to put them through programs every day. That's what I would do if I was like a politician. I would just make them do prison labor all day. You would work every day, all day. And you would just be sitting in programs and doing classes and shit. And we would just be putting you to work.
Can take place in any prison where there are lots of offenders, but increasingly the thought has been to have dedicated institutions for such offenders altogether to entirely eliminate the risk of reprisal-based violence. They help create a more secure environment for offenders, which reduces the need for protective custody or special housing units in regular prisons, which makes space for more violent inmates.
That makes sense.
Institutions aren't overly new, they're just not all that common. Take HMP Wotton, for example, in the British city of Nottingham. It was built in the 60s, but the prison has been dedicated to offender management since the early 1990s. Wotton holds roughly 800 inmates, and all of them are offenders. 70% of those who are incarcerated here have committed offences against children.
Oh my God.
The prison's local nickname is the Pedo Palace. But of course, they too come with their own downsides. They're not popular, as you can tell by HMP Wotton's nickname, and so there's not a lot of political will to protect what most in society see as the lowest of the low. So, whilst such programs appear to work, nobody's exactly gagging to build an offender prison in their local area for obvious reasons. In general, these prisons are believed to help offenders prepare for life back on the outside.
Oh, no. Whoa. Hello. Some of them do get out. Fuck. I mean, yeah, there needs to be programs. You know what's crazy? Of course it's a place in England. You know what I mean? America would never do some shit like this. They would just house them up and then let them back out.
Whether you agree or don't, sentencing guidelines don't mandate an immediate life sentence for offenders in most places, which means they will be released back into society at some point.
Yeah.
And even if you have no sympathy for them, it's better for those capable of committing such crimes to not be violently institutionalized, and instead for them to at least try and be rehabilitated, as the other option leads to patterns of reoffending, which only punishes society and creates more victims.
That does make sense. I'm not gonna lie. If you are serving a sentence that isn't a life sentence, it would make sense for you to be put in programs, classes, and things to at least try to get you back on the right track. That is true. Damn. I don't know if you've ever seen the sex offender registry, bro. You see the little red arrow? Them bitches are everywhere. They are everywhere. That's true.
It makes sense, then, for the betterment of the public safety for such institutions to exist. But remember, most prisons aren't like this. Most offenders in prison live an isolated, violent, and miserable life. And even though many weren't sentenced to life, they end up never leaving. Some will call it a mercy, others a net positive on the world, and some will just call it the natural order of things.
Yeah.
One thing is for certain, though. Even at the bottom of the ladder, it shows there is always further a person can fall.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout.
Oh, damn, that's it? I thought he was gonna say something else. This was a hella good video. I mean, bro, to like wrap up my thoughts on this video, I'm gonna say this. I don't give a fuck. I just don't. I don't sympathize with people like this, bro. That you should consider that before you do the crime, man. If you what do they say? If you don't do the time, do the crime, whatever the fucking quote is. But hey, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate you for watching all the way through, and I'll see you in the next one.